Okay, look, good evening everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. Also good evening to any of our members who are watching this meeting online. What's important to us now is that we have a meeting with our members, we engage with our members, and at the end of the day the members will make their mind up. It's important they use their vote, we respect everybody's views, but what we do want is an informed discussion about this agreement. When we first visited Pompey, not the first time, but when I visited you in December, I have to say I was struck by how strong you were as a branch, how strong the members were in Pompey. It was a fantastic meeting, and what really struck me was how much you'd invested in this dispute. Not just the financial sacrifices, as big as they were, that you and thousands of our members, over 100,000 of our members, lost a lot of money during this dispute. But I recognised immediately that you also understood the cause that we were fighting. And you understood that the actions and the behaviours of Royal Mail were the most unacceptable that we've ever witnessed in our history. So look, I thought it was fitting that we came back here and that we now had the chance to talk about the agreement that we've reached. We want to have a meeting where we want to debate the agreement, we respect everybody's views on it, we want to hear your comments, your opinions. Of course, as the guys have said, we want to make sure that we can answer as many questions that you've got about the agreement. And we do recognise that there are elements to this agreement that not all of our members are going to like. There are elements of this agreement that we don't like. But we want to talk about that in the round, and we hopefully, by the end of that, we want to try and convince our members that if you view this as an overall package, if you see it set against the reality of the circumstances, unprecedented circumstances that we've had to deal with, and you've had to deal with, we're going to talk a little bit about that, then we believe that this is a good deal for our members for now and for the future. And I think it's a good deal for anybody who cares about the future of this company. Most of us have worked here, for all our lives. I'm sure there's a lot of people across the country who are in that position. So let's talk about the whole thing. This is your meeting, but before we get into the wider debate that we're looking forward to, what I want to do is set some of that context out for you, and I want to also talk about some of the areas of the agreement and demonstrate to you with confidence that we have definitely shifted, with your support, Royal Mail from where we were originally to where we've ended up on pretty much every single position. So I think it was Paul who said that this wasn't an ordinary dispute. This was, without doubt, the most bitter, intense, and vicious dispute from the employer that our members have ever been involved in. And I would go further than that and say this is the worst attack that we've seen over the last year on any group of workers in the United Kingdom. Never thought that would happen with a company like Royal Mail. Never thought that would happen when you've done such a fantastic job during the pandemic to keep this company going, that in a matter of months, they shifted their position. And we've got to recognise it, that how we got to that point was that they made their mind up, that they had a well-funded, well-coordinated campaign, and it was about making sure that they break the spirit of every single postal worker, that they remove all of our reps from the workplace, and that they destroy this union so that they could advance an agenda that was about turning Royal Mail into just another gig economy employer. They wanted that to be the start of abandoning daily deliveries, and they wanted that and were going to government behind the backs of the union to undermine the universal service offering. That was the basis of this dispute. And I can say this with complete honesty. They had no intention whatsoever at the start of this dispute of reaching a negotiating settlement with our union. And they had every intention of ending up in a place where that plan that I've just spoken about could be pushed forward without any resistance from a compliant workforce right across the UK. And I'm going to say to you and all of our members watching live now, they did not succeed in achieving that plan. We've overturned that plan. With your support, we've stopped them doing all of those things. There will be change. We'll come on to that. I want to talk about change initially from a context point of view. And many of you would have seen us doing interviews and the union people that were doing interviews. One thing we always said, this union is not facing away from change. And we never have. The previous agreement, Pathway to Change, if you go back and look at that, many of the issues that we've now dealt with under the terms of this agreement were out there in that previous agreement to be dealt with. The company decided to walk away from that deal, and then we got into the dispute. But what I want to say to you is that if we don't change, if the company doesn't change, and that's irrespective of the people who are running the company, who we have issues with, you'll have issues with, and we'll talk about that tonight. But if we don't change, we won't be having a row about whether or not there's later starts and later finishes. This company will not exist going forward. It has reached a point. I talk to a lot of postal workers, people around where I live, people that I come across when I'm travelling around the country, and obviously at meetings like we're having tonight. And I hear most of them saying, we know the company has got to change, but we don't like the way that the company are addressing that. Well, you know, we have got to grab change now, because this is the moment that was always coming since privatisation, was always coming because the world of communications has moved massively in a different way, where customers need different things now to what they used to rely on with postal workers' jobs. And in many ways, you know, if it hadn't been through a dispute, we would have been having similar debates about change. So I do want people to recognise that there isn't really an option about change. You know, Royal Mail has to become a company where you can go online late at night and you can ask for a parcel to be delivered, and the company can deliver it right the way through the following day up to the early evening, like you see all of the other couriers. Of course, Royal Mail has got other things that it does, and through this agreement, we think we've ensured that it can continue to do those other things, and maybe, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well, build on some different products and services in the future. The other bit of context is their financial position. So, you know, when we started out, you'll all remember where we were going on the TV, on the radio, we were talking to our members, and we were quoting figures that were accurate figures based on what Royal Mail's profits were, including GLS, admittedly, it was about 50-50 between the two, the other year, where they posted £758 million profits. And they then, as you will remember, gave that money away. And we stand by every single thing that we've said about how they've grossly mismanaged the finances of the company, how they've brought through their actions the company almost to the point of administration. And that was wrong, what they've done there, completely wrong. They chose to give that money to shareholders when they knew that there was going to be a downturn in traffic, when they knew all the forecasts of the economic situation was going on. Yet they still did that. So we stand by everything we said. However, we have to now recognise, and that will become clear to all of our members in the next few weeks when they post their numbers for this year, the company does now face the most serious financial, economic and market conditions in its history. There's no way out of that now. Unfortunately, that is the position that we have to look at with where the numbers are. We don't think they're making that up. We've had an independent person come in and look at all of that for us and what their options were when they were threatening us with, they were at the point of administration. We didn't think they was quite at that point, but it was true. They ain't far away from it. And without this agreement, without the opportunity to rebuild the company, I think that's where we would have ended up. So, let's see how their business plan operates over the next few months. That's why, when we start talking about some of these issues in a bit more detail, that you'll recognise some of the financial positions that are attached to some of the change issues, start to make it a very difficult negotiation for everybody. Having said all of that, this was always going to be a difficult deal, but we are in no doubt that we have shifted this company a very, very long way from where we started out in this dispute to where we've ended up, including from their best and final offer. And I just want to highlight a few of the areas that we'll talk about in a bit more detail in a minute. And the first one is job security. Now, you'll remember, we started out here with them saying compulsory redundancies are on the table. They then moved to a position that they put out in writing where they said that they were willing to give us a no compulsory redundancy guarantee only up until March of this year, just gone. We then got to a point where they chose, I think it was actually the day before we came down to Pompey and did the meeting on the picket line, so well attended, brilliant meeting, where they wrote that letter to our members. And what we're saying to you is a letter from the employer where it just said no compulsory redundancies wasn't worth the paper it was written, weren't an agreement with the union. Where we've ended up on that is that we have now got a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies through to the end of April 2025, with an opportunity to review at that point whether we can continue with that guarantee. As important as that guarantee, and that's big in the circumstances that we're facing, we have secured in this agreement a range of other assurances that make up a very strong job security section of this agreement. In section 3, you'll have the opportunity to look at that. It talks about the USO, so they've recommitted to the USO. That wasn't where they were looking to go. We've said that we're willing to talk about that as we move forward, and if needs be, if we get to the right position, we'll jointly approach the government and Ofcom to talk about that in the future. But they've committed back to the USO. They've committed to ensuring that this company will not become a gig economy employer. They've committed to ensuring that there will be no separate parcel company, and they've committed to ensuring that in terms of growth, that growth will take place with our existing core members of the Royal Mail Group. Where they wanted to go was bring in an entirely different resourcing model, predominantly made up of self-employed workers. They've committed no self-employed workers in Royal Mail core operations, a freeze on recruitment. They wanted unlimited numbers of owner drivers, self-employed drivers. We're nothing against any of those people, but that was the business model that they felt was the only way they could compete in the future. So please take a bit of time and look at how comprehensive the job security section now is. We've also got the company to commit to a project, which I referred to earlier on, whereas to achieve growth, yes, we're going after growth in the parcels market, but also they've agreed to a project, which was the CW's idea, to expand the role of postal workers. There is so much more that this company could be doing if it saw the existing infrastructure, what you do in delivering to 32 million addresses every single day. If that company really took on board the ideas of the union, the ideas that they may come up with, the ideas that our frontline members will have, we believe we can develop local to local services, we can do more in terms of how we work with communities, the sort of wider social role that might create good jobs going forward in the future. And we have been working with people who deal with something called community wealth building. It's a new way of looking at how you build your economy. It's a bottom-up approach. We believe postal workers can have a crucial role in developing economies growing across the UK again, some of the stuff that the government refer to as a levelling up agenda. We've been talking to the Labour Party about that, and we're confident that if we put the effort that this agreement says we're going to put into that, that we can develop other products and services and maybe start to grow revenue in different ways, not just a parcels company. On flexibility, we'll talk about that. We know there's issues with that in terms of where we are now, seasonal variations. But I'm going to say to you, seasonal variations is a world away from where we started this dispute. It is not annualised hours. Annualised hours, at 4 weeks' notice, they were going to move your start times, move your finish times on a 4-week basis as they saw fit. But worse than that, annualised hours linked to CISO was going to be used on a flexi-bank system where you would be owing them hours, they might owe you some hours, literally on a day-to-day basis. You had no finish time under that arrangement, you had to carry on working. Seasonal variations clears all of that out of the way, and it means that we have agreed at peak periods you would work 39 hours. During the summer, you go to 35 hours, and there's about 22 weeks of the year where you work the 37 hours that you do now. You'll know all of that at least a year in advance, and we think that that in itself will help rid us of something that we know a lot of our postal workers don't like, which is lapsing on the day and absorption. There's an opportunity there to deal with that. On Sundays, when we started, they moved pretty quick to say, after the first couple of disputes, well, we won't make Sundays compulsory, but they did want that at the very outset. What we've done in the deal now, we've ensured that Sunday premium is also still intact. On the new parcel network, we've got to have this debate with our members. They didn't want our members delivering on those dedicated parcel routes. They wanted to get that out, as I said earlier on, to self-employed drivers. We've got a chance now, and would urge people to look at this, to create rotates in offices. We've got a chance to do it as additional earnings opportunities, and we've got a chance to go back to some of the things that we used to do many years ago. And we believe that if we encourage people to look at these duties, some of our members may well say, do you know what, I don't mind doing that afternoon shift. So not about forcing people into it, but about local reps being able to negotiate packages around how the duty structures are set up. It's really important on Sundays that it's our members, on dedicated parcel routes, that it's our members that do that work. And maybe we've got to talk about this and create the right attendance patterns, and all of that can be done through the terms of this agreement. On allowances, we have completely reversed where Royal Mail were on allowances. They had a host of all the main allowances that they wanted to get rid of, legacy allowances or bonus payments, various things that you would have seen in there that they want. That's gone completely from this deal. That would have affected, significant percentages of our members in terms of losing money that they currently get. Now, sick absence is a very, very difficult part of this agreement. And we haven't been able to shift them as far away from where they were originally. We have moved them, but not as far as we wanted. But as I said to you, if I explained that they are saying that sick absence costs the company around £250 million a year. I heard a figure yesterday that there's around 5,000 people currently on long-term sick, and there's around 3,000 people that are regular people who go off sick. It was always going to be one where the numbers that were attached to trying to save some money on that, and I know it's not great, when you start looking at that. But I think in the round is something that in the end we recognise that we had to do the agreement. We moved them in a couple of areas. One on statutory sick pay, we moved them quite away from where they originally started, where they was talking about doing it pretty much after the first absence all the time. We've moved them to a point now where we can reverse the statutory sick pay if sick absence comes down. We've also got a joint working group that's going to be set up that wasn't in there originally to have a look at the real causes of sick absence. And you know what those causes are, our members know. The majority of those causes are the way that they treat our members. And we've got them to sign up to working on this working group, get underneath some of that stuff and put in its place a proper supportive plan for people when they're off sick. On ill health retirement, we used to have a position where there was 34 weeks. If you looked at the Royal Mail's proposal, they took it back to where on average there'd be about 8 weeks where people could only get about 8 weeks. We managed to get that up to 16 weeks. You still get your lieu of notice, and you still get accrued annual leave at that point. So effectively what that means, it was at 12 months at one point, it's now going to come down to about 7 months pay. But crucially, people still have the 6 months full pay leading into that and 6 months half pay. I'm going to be honest with you, if you look around, those policies, as we feel, that it's not good at all, they're still a lot better than what you see in a lot of other companies. So we're not hiding away from that. It's not part of the agreement we like, but that was as far as we could shift the company. On new entrants, again, another part of the deal that we don't like. But we have got the company, after they impose those contracts, to now sit down with us in another joint working group and consider alternative approaches. We think that they're going to bring people in, and we don't think they're going to stay. And during that period, we're going to look at the wider market. They keep saying that we're 40% above overall the cost of employing somebody in these gig economy companies. We don't believe it's 40%, so we're going to do a proper research into that. We're going to look to see if we can create another grade. And that's been signed up to in the agreement. And we would want them people to have the opportunity to progress from that grade into the OPG grade. So we're in there, we've got a chance to reverse that over a period of time. And obviously, as the company, if it can restore itself in terms of getting back to profitability, which we want that to happen, then at that point, we'll be pushing very strongly for some of these things to change. I want to talk about pay. Now, I'm going to say to you that we know, and I actually think the company know, that what's on offer on pay is not what our members deserve. We know that, but against the financial backdrop that we now know as well, there wasn't going to be an opportunity to negotiate more on basic pay. And we actually think that the deal that's on offer, I know they put out 2 options on it, that was wrong of them to put them 2 options out. They were trying to press us into taking the option with a higher lump sum at the front end because we couldn't get the back pay. Obviously, we didn't do the change when it was back in the time when they were talking about the 3.5%. It was linked to that deal. They weren't offering back pay at that point, as you know. But 10%, £500 lump sum worth, they would say 2% over 3 years. We're not saying that's great at all. But in the financial circumstances, that deal cost them about 500 million a year to put that deal in that context. The savings attached to this deal is around about £350 million if they get all of those savings based on all the things that are in it. And what I'd say to you is they're banking on growing volume, getting some of the volume back in order to plug that gap. So not a great deal on pay, but I do want to add this point, and a few of you have watched what we've been saying in recent weeks. We have opened up a separate discussion on the potential for a further lump sum. And we hope to be in a position, it's related to some external factors, where jointly we're going to look at this and see whether we can come up with something. More information will come out if we're successful. There's no guarantees, but our hope is, and our aim, and their aim at this point, is that we can produce something before the members get the ballot paper, so that we know one way or another where that further lump sum is going to come on the table. Can't really say much more than that about that issue. Big issue here for the union. When you look at this deal, remember how much they didn't want any of our reps anywhere in this country. They wanted to destroy the CWU because they thought that was the best way to get to where the company wanted to get to. Every single paragraph of this agreement has got the CWU plastered all over it. We're back in the workplace. We're back in the IR framework that gives our reps the right to agree or disagree on revision proposals and put counter proposals. Now, I know people are going to be saying, can you trust them? And I'll be honest with you, no. Don't ever trust them. That's why we're trade unions. We have trade unions because we don't trust management completely. What we've dealt with in terms of management, I still sit there sometimes and I just cannot believe some of the actions. You know, the dismissals, the suspensions, the deliberate targeting of people. And we have got the independent review. Let's talk a little bit about that. So look, what I'm saying to you is not about trusting them, but without this deal, we'd effectively be giving them the green light to carry on in exactly the same way they are now. We have got a third party, and the CW has pushed that third party, so Brendan Barber, who helped facilitate the deal, and ACAS, they're going to continue to oversee it. So they're there to make sure that both sides honour the spirit and content of the agreement. I'll finish by saying this. It's been a long bit of dispute, but where we've ended up is unrecognisable from where we started in terms of what they were putting on the table, and is far better than their so-called best and final offer. Now it's up to our members. We want to have that proper debate with the members. Tonight's a good opportunity to do that with you guys and online with our members who are watching, but we'll be coming out, we'll be doing local reps briefings, and then the members will make their minds up. So look, thanks very much for your support throughout this dispute. This is a deal we believe that represents the best possible outcome, and we do believe it gives us a platform for the future that we didn't have during the course of the dispute. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Dave. So we'd now like to open it to the floor. If we could have a show of hands, who would like to ask a question? Anybody else? So we've got Colin, John Baker, Mark, Stuart. Sorry, I've forgotten your name. Becky. Anyone else? Yeah? Colleague at back, don't you know? Chris. Right, okay, so do you want to do a night time, Dave, and go in?
Let's take about three or four.
Right, okay, yeah. Colin.
The obvious question, Dave, is if it comes to a no vote, where do we stand?
Well, let's do the other questions. We'll come to that.
Right, John Baker.
Yeah, hi Dave. So where do you see the USO in the future?
And Mark.
Yeah, so I've been asked to ask this question. Is obviously we've got new starters, and they said the 1st of December is the new contracts were put out. They were actually putting people on them from the 1st of November. Where do we stand? Obviously pulling that back and getting them onto the proper part-time contracts.
Okay, so if we take them three first of all. Colin, a good question. If people vote no, I mean, the first thing I would want to say is that the members should consider this deal. View it as a package, look at all of the bits and pieces in it, and have an informed decision before you vote. I don't think it's in anybody's interest just to say I'm voting yes without looking at it, and it's not in people's interest to say I'm voting no. Honest answer, and I think it's time for that sort of engagement with our members. I think the company is in not a very good place. We don't like the way that management have treated our members. We don't like some of the managers in the sense of, do we trust them that are leading this company? But the way we're looking at it is, if this deal goes down, then we're on the path to some sort of mutual self-destruction of this company. And I think that's got to be truthful. That's why we've spent a lot of time trying to negotiate the agreement rather than just carry on striking. We have reached that point where we've got to face up to the reality of that. And you know, something that I would say, if we don't trust the managers to sort of live by this agreement, let's trust ourselves and the workers who care about the future of Royal Mail to actually come up with the solutions that are going to get the company back on track going forward. And I think that's a better outcome for our members, colleague, than voting against this deal. John, the USO, again, let's have that conversation now properly. We've had a few briefings with reps where similar questions have been asked. So we really, really like the universal service. It's the thing that sets Royal Mail apart from any other company. It delivers to 32 million addresses. And one of the arguments that we've used consistently is, if you've got that level of infrastructure, why on earth would you not use that as the platform to build other products and other services? And I think it's just because they got so focused on only having a parcel company. We've had that route in the previous agreement and the one before that, that they only see that as the future. But our job is to protect the USO. We've got them back to committing to the USO. But I'm going to say something, because obviously we're aware of what's going on around Europe and across the world. And it is true that in most countries now, the USO is either been peeled back to about 3 days. In some countries, it's pretty much gone. And France, that was one of the only ones that was anywhere near the UK, they're just about to move back to 3 days. So here's the debate that I think we need to think about. Our fear on the USO is that if you lost that, you lose more jobs because you're not delivering the letters. Letters, by the way, are never going to go completely. They're going to plateau out at some point. So there is a role for delivering letters going forward, but there's got to be a rebalancing between letters and parcels in terms of how we resource that. So look, here's a view. If we had to have a conversation and it was a choice between people pushing for the USO to go back to 3 days, and if we had a conversation with the government, I forgot to mention earlier on that the expanded role of the Postal Workers Project, the company have agreed, by the way, to go to government, to go to metro mayors, to go to local councils and develop that project so that we can start to tap into some of what is going on in the wider economy and in communities. Then maybe in the future you reach a point where you tip the balance because of how it still may continue to decline in terms of letters. It may be worth at some point considering where we are on the Saturday option, but only if we knew that the USO was still going to be guaranteed on the other 5 days, and only if we could find other work that we would do. That balance I'm referring to is that in terms of job losses, we may reach a point where the decline in traffic over the whole week starts to impact on us more than just by trying to argue to keep the full 6 days. And it might impact on more jobs. Now, I don't think we're at that point, but I think we've got to be honest about that. We want to protect it, but it's got to be economically sustainable. and we will work with government to ensure that that is the case. Mark, the new starters, how do we tackle that? Well, what the agreement says is that, I mean, we didn't want it. We want the workers, and we want to look after the workers. But what the agreement now says is that we get collective bargaining rights over those workers. That's not what Roma wanted originally. That there's going to be a joint working group that's going to commence immediately to look at alternatives to those contracts. And that's when I said earlier on that we want to look at the potential for a break. What's interesting about it, I don't know if any of you have looked in detail, it's an appalling contract. And it's something that we've got to change. Now, I think some of that will change, because I don't think they're going to keep people on those contracts. I mean, they're struggling to keep people on our contracts at the moment, because people have seen the behaviours of the company. But what we want to look at, I mean, the pay is actually, I think we worked it out, it's £188 less over a year, but they don't get the supplements. You know, you get the weekly supplements, maybe working, processing, delivery, or distribution. I think the delivery one's around about £27. They don't get that. But where the big difference is in the working hours, where they've put them back to a gross 40 hours. But that obviously then means that they are getting unpaid meal release. So they're effectively working longer than that. But we want to look at it in a constructive way. We want to make the arguments now that we're out of the dispute as to why that's not a sustainable position. And we'll be doing everything we can over a period of time to bring them people back to where the rest of our members are. At least we've got the opportunity under this deal to do that. We didn't have that before the agreement.
Stuart?
Yeah, good. All right. Basically, I want to pick up on the revisions that have already been deployed, which are basically lapsing plans that have been pushed as revisions, and how do we go about unpicking those? And I've also heard rumours that they want to reduce the indoor work of people by up to 25 minutes, when they're already trying to stack more work against them in terms of scanning at the frame, and now with the ill-fated redelivery plan that they've got going forward. And I just wonder where we stand on terms of how we go about unpicking those revisions, because they're unworkable for everyone knows it, but now they also want to stack more work against those duties, and basically how do we cope with that? And number two is there's currently trials in Ringwood, and I believe they're going to push one in Hedge End in the Wessex South Central area on these frames that they come in to dictate to you how much work you've got per day. I just want to understand what that means, and B, how it works. I'm actually paying a visit to Ringwood on next Tuesday and meeting the area delivery rep down there then to go through it. But it seems to me that this is their plan for the future, and where do we stand on that?
Okay, Becky?
I have a question from a member. It's about the 30 minutes flex time. They believe it's open to abuse, and they've asked if they have to work longer hours. It could be because of people obviously being off sick, as mentioned, there's an awful lot. When someone isn't appropriately matched in speed to them, age difference, they could be slower, as well as very long hours at Christmas, and when they are already working long hours over the week. They just want to know more in detail, please.
And Krista?
Yeah, I asked this question from the point of view as to whether we're likely to see the rate of change that we've seen in the last year in the future. Yeah. So, do you believe that the business model that Royal Mail currently have is now on the table? Is likely to return the business to model?
Okay, I mean, again, good questions. Stuart, the revisions, the imposed revisions, which have been disastrous across, huge parts of the country, There are parts of the country where that isn't the case. Although I'm sure now I've said that, we'll get lots of members telling us that's not true. But it's been chaos. And what they've done, because of their financial position, because of the disgraceful way that they set out bonuses to managers to just implement the revisions, they didn't give a damn about quality of service and about the USO. And I think that they've done that knowing full well that it was going to be chaotic. Where does it come from? I think we've got to look a little bit at what they would say to us in the room. We're only putting in the revisions and the productivity targets that we agreed under the Pathway to Change agreement. And what we're saying to them is that there's a lot that's happened since that point. So obviously COVID came in. So their argument was that we didn't do all of the revisions that we'd done previously. Their other argument is that they've had to add on something that realigns resourcing to workload decline. So parcels reduced, and I think most of our members would have seen that. Letters continued to decline. It fell off the edge of a cliff in many ways after the pandemic. And so they're trying to claim all that ground back, and they're using their scientific methods to look at that. What we try to say to them is, why don't you ever realise that if you treat people properly, then most people can be trusted on what a decent day's work is for a decent day's pay, and they'll work with you on solving these problems. But when you impose change, you ain't going to get people working with you. Now, what we've done, and you'll see it very high up in the agreement, is that the revisions that we want to deal with now is effectively the first step of this agreement. So the first thing, I think it's para 2.5 of the agreement, correct me if I'm wrong on that, it's somewhere around that point, where it talks about we're now going to go out, jointly review those revisions, look at restoring quality of service, look at restoring the USO failures, and all of that stuff that you saw the CEO when he was on the select committee saying that it wasn't telling people to leave the letters behind, and they weren't doing all of that stuff, and we all know, and our members all know, because thousands of them wrote in saying they're not telling the truth. What we've got to do now is restore quality of service. They've committed to it. Why would it be different? I think the reason why the pressure is on, it's almost reversing now the pressure onto them, is because Ofcom have seen it. Ofcom are getting loads of people complaining. We've written very strong letters due to meet Ofcom in the near future. What we want is to put quality service right. What we want is to put these revisions right. Now, I'm not saying that the company are going to go, well, we're putting ours back in to do this, but at the end of the day, they've got to wise up to one thing. They cannot grow this business if they fail quality service. More and more customers will walk away from Royal Mail. That's the pressure that they are now under. So it's the first step in the agreement. We need to do it. On the indoor work, we agreed to do this trial in previous agreements. We've never quite got round to dealing with it. Again, I can tell you that right across Europe, they are starting to move away from the type of frames that we have, because as letters decline, they come up with other ways of doing the indoor prep. Now, what we've agreed to is some trials on that, and as part of those trials, we're going to have to come up with solutions to workload, to fatigue on delivery. All of them things are all in there that we'll have a look at. You raised an interesting point about renewal, and I'd urge you to speak to Mark Bush. You probably already have spoken to Mark, because we weren't aware, apart from when you guys raised it with us, that they were advancing that in those areas. Now, what we can do now is grab hold of that through this agreement. We can be involved in that trial, and we can come up with the best possible solutions. So, that's where we are with that. Becky, your 30 minutes flex time. Yeah, I can see exactly how this could be abused. It's something that's been there for a long, long time. It's never really properly been used in the right way anywhere, I don't think. And it can be quite confusing to think, well, how are you going to overlay seasonal variations? How are you going to overlay network changes and late starts and late finishes? How are you going to do all of that? I think I forgot to mention late starts and late finishes. Let's come on to that. We can have a proper discussion about that with the 30 minutes. So what we've said is let's have another look at the 30 minutes flex. Let's make sure it isn't used in a way that people abuse it, managers abuse it, to just continually adding time on at the end. And that's something that we want to look at. Stuart, a really good question. Do we think... Oh, was it Chris? Sorry. Right. Chris, an even better question than Stuart's. Do we believe that this model that we're moving to is going to get the company back to some form of profitability? Don't think there can be any guarantees on that. We're going to have to work at that. We're going to have to make sure that we do a number of different things to grow products and so on. I think the key is here, can the business grow again? At the moment, it's going like that. Now, we are starting to see some signs where there seems to be some stabilising of that. But what we've got to do, and what this agreement has got to do, is grow parcel volume, not give it to the competitors, grow other products and services on top of the universal service so that we can sustain that, not just delivering letters, by the way, delivering these local to local services, various other things. We've got some really good ideas to come through on that, and frontline employees are going to be involved in that project. If that all happens, then I think there is a good chance that we can secure the future of the company, secure long-term jobs. If it doesn't happen, we're back into the place when I answered Colin's question that we could see this company not exist in a few years' time. I'll be honest about that. These are the choices that sit in front of us.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I'll let you all have a think about some questions. Chris, have you got anyone online that wants to come in at this stage? No? No. Okay, so we've got Dwayne, Mick, anyone else? Colleague, you're Dwayne, I don't know your name, sorry. Dan? Sorry, yeah. So, Dwayne. Okay. Dwayne.
There's sort of a couple of questions and sort of statements, I suppose. We used to agreements were on the table, probably used to agreements with a lot of detail. I think this one's got a lot of words, not so much detail. The pylon, I'm guessing, is 12 weeks working on what you said the sum was, but it's not in there.
Yes.
There is ill health, and there is the VR saying, or EVR saying that it's not in line with the NTSF. But why is it? Because again, it doesn't mention what the terms of EVRs. And the issue I have, most of us, I think Dave and Paul probably got that in this area, are leaving the business through our choice through the last time. We've got a wave of people, plus 50, with bad knees, bad backs, bad shoulders, who cannot get to 67 doing this job. There's no chance. Ill Alpha Retirement was our way out. VR seems to have disappeared. It was a good way of clearing the decks in the years gone by. We've had quite a lot of people left with quite a bit of money. The youngsters move up to seniority. We've got people in our office, loads of seniority, but they're not moving anywhere. So, I think we have issues with that. We would like to know what VR terms would be. Lapsing and absorption isn't done in this area on workload. It's done on budget. They don't care whether you can do it or not. They just want to save hours. They're quite happy if we leave our walk and do the absorption. So again, it's how do we report failures in USO? Because Royal Mail, they're quite happy to leave. We've left an office today, it's bloody mad, isn't it? And we've been clearing up for months, and all of a sudden it's gone pear-shaped. Myself and Dave, I think I'm renowned for being quite a positive individual, isn't that true, Dave? I don't see how we have re-engaged in the workplace. I think we're all now, following the revisions, think they can do what they want. If they see this as almost a victory nationally, picking us off locally is going to be much easier. So I'm not so optimistic that we're back in the workplace. They'll use, I think, reps as a way of trying to get revisions in that are unpopular. So that concerns me. And I don't know how to word this. That's probably best not to. No, I'll leave it at that. I think if you word it badly, it'll come across.
Mick?
I need one thing. Sacked and suspended colleagues. Was it the best deal you could get with Royal Mail to put it out to an independent review? Do you not think they've been thrown under the bus a bit? Just the easy way out?
Okay. Thanks, Mick. Pat?
The automatic redelivery is coming this week. Didn't know if CW would agree to that or Royal Mail imposed it. And what's the future for the callers offices? Because just for this week alone, we've seen a massive decline in stuff coming back and processes not really followed correctly about things.
Right, so Dwayne, a number of points. What the agreement says about what we used to call managing the surplus framework agreement is that will apply in full with the exception of the VR terms. We haven't been able to get them back to the previous VR terms, which were amongst the best in terms of years of service compared to what you've got. The reason for that is their financial position. And the reason that they've not given VRs is because they can't afford them at the moment. What's going to happen is that with this agreement, they now have an opportunity in the next week or two to go to the banks, to go to various people and see if they can get their overdraft facilities. I mean, maybe we shouldn't be talking in this way, I don't know, but it's pretty serious stuff. I think they would have wanted to have let people go during the VR because they're effectively carrying, as they see it, surplus. And if you agreed to no compulsory redundancies, you're doing that anyway. And I think that they'll come back out with VR and let people go probably a little bit after they get to the end of the period where we've either agreed the deal or not, and providing that they are able to access and borrow a significant amount of money. I remember during the dispute, they claimed that they had a 1.7 billion war chest. The papers reported it in that way. They've gone to us, that wasn't what that was for, we wasn't using it for that. We'll come on to whether or not that was true. But the reality is that was money that they've got in an overdraft facility, and it's such a sort of balancing act at the moment. And I'm not here to apologise for these people, not at all. But we are here to report, and I think you'll see that when they report their accounts. I think it's around the 17th of May. They won't be able to hide that. I think you're going to see a massive decline in the finances of the company from where they were when they posted those profits to where they are come May. And they've had to do things to create, with the business plan, something that people believe is going to return some sort of level of money back into the company. That's what we've been up against in that way. What will the VR terms be? We'll always be hopeful that as we move forward, we can get the VR terms back to where they were. What they'll probably be is the 9-month option. They put that, was it a 30-day thing where they said there might be another, was it £3,000 or something? I can't remember now. But where it went up to about a year. So I think it'll be one of those two that we'll be talking to them about that But the honest position is the reason they not let people go is they couldn't afford to let them go at that point. With the lapsing and absorption, yeah, I mean, it's budget driven. That's the reality of it. We don't agree with that. And what we're saying now, where they run up against the problem, so this is why I have more confidence. And I know you've been a great rep over the years, and I respect you, you know that, and many other reps who have similar views. But I think they've got a major problem that they've caused now. They can't walk away from the quality of service failures any longer. They can't walk away from the USO failures any longer. The select committee have written to Ofcom calling for an investigation. We've written to Ofcom. We want to solve that problem. And the best way they can solve that problem is working with people locally. Now, your point about have we re-engaged, let's sort of think about where we are with some of these people. So they've spent a year pretty much where that mantra, which I think is one of the most disgraceful things I've ever heard from a company, it's their business to run, which was basically alienating every single worker. They did that to fire up their managers. They did that to say, you've had years of having to deal with the CWU, we're not having to deal with the CWU anymore. If you look at the agreement, we can't write any stronger words in there than what are in there. It says in the opening introduction, the whole agreement is underpinned by the principle of working together with the union. It says immediately underneath that, we're going to do that on the basis of mutual interest solutions. It says in the agreement that the IR framework is restored. We met yesterday the COO, Chief Operating Officer, who we think has been working behind the scenes with the rods, is it they call them, to make sure that like this feeling of we're in control now, and you don't have to talk to the reps. This is where this has all stemmed from. Well, what we're going to have to do, we agreed yesterday, we met them, pointed out all the bits, asked them up front, are you up for this deal? Because what it means essentially is two things, working together. It means one, that imposition of change going forward has got to stop, and they've got to work with people on that. I know there's some revisions that are in that place where they're just about to be imposed or have been imposed in the last few weeks. But when we go back to trying to resolve those revisions, the deal couldn't be any clearer. And the other thing they've got to do is abandon that mantra. I mean, if they want people on board, all they've got to do, put this to them yesterday, all you've got to do is go out there and say two things. One, we recognise that imposing change is not the right way forward. Two, and we recognise that you have a stake in this business, that's written in there, that our members have a stake in this business, and they've got to abandon that mantra. Now, can I sit here in front of you today and say, are they all sitting there thinking, yeah, we're going to do that, and we're going to play the game? Well, you know some of these characters, I know some of these characters. We're going to have to force them to that position. What we are doing, I mean, they're saying all the right things, is all I can report back. At that level, then people ain't been nowhere near us for months. They're now sitting in the room with us. We've got a meeting with all our divisional reps and all of these rods and general managers where we'll be going through this agreement in the next week or two, and we'll be asking them and fronting up some of them. Now they're going to say, are you up for the deal? And we're going to say, yeah, of course we are. But what I would keep adding is that we've also got ACAS and Sir Brendan Barber, who are going to continue to have oversight of this agreement. So I think we can say with some confidence that where we are now is so much better than where we've been in the last 12 months in terms of re-engagement. And I know that if the members get behind that and come up with solutions, to revisions, where I know reps are already putting forward deals where they can get people on good attendance patterns, where they've got dedicated parcel routes that people want to go and do, and where they've got like every other Saturday off. People are starting to look at that. We used to have that in our union in abundance when we were local reps, and we didn't wait for a national, we got in there. What we're trying to do is give you the platform back, and that'll be the first test, won't it? So let's put them to that test. Mick, do we think we've let down people who have been sacked, suspended and dismissed? No. We don't think that we've let them down. We've fought so hard because what's happened to a lot of them people, I'm not saying every single case is so wrong. There's a guy sitting just behind you, Steve, I spoke to him before the meeting. He's been sacked, gross misconduct, 32 years service. Nothing taken into account about his record, he apologised, just put something on social media, just put a post that we all do. When the CEO was on social media, his own platform, goading people every week, I think what the independent review will do, without any shadow of a doubt, will expose some of that stuff. We couldn't get them themselves to change those positions because that's where they were. They've targeted these people. They're defending some of the managers. They've taken decisions where they move aside the local managers and the line managers who should be hearing the cases, and they've put people in who have nothing to do with the conduct code or anything like that, just so that they could control every single decision. We know there's managers who have agreed to let our people back, didn't think it was as serious, and they've been pulled from that decision, and they've then had the central people coming down and saying, no, you've got to sack them. We've raised the bar, our business standards. You've only got to look at some of the cases. They are the same words that they've used as a catch-all phrase because they wanted them people out. We did it to break the spirit. This is the best chance that we've got of exposing that, and we have got confidence that independent people, Lord Faulkner in this case, who is someone very well known, you know, he's going to look at this, we believe, in a fair-minded way.
You're going to look at every case.
We've got the right to refer the cases to it. We can't refer cases that weren't linked or haven't arisen out of the dispute. But we will make sure that they look at every case that we refer to. We think there's around 250. We're still gathering that information at the moment. And we are confident that anybody looking at this from an independent viewpoint will realise that what Royal Mail have done is so wrong. Automatic pack pre-delivery and what happens to the callers' offices. Look, I'm not that close to the detail of that, so the other guys normally deal with that. I understand what you're saying. They've launched this service where they redeliver. It's going to have an impact on the caller's office. But remember, when we were in the middle of this, they were closing all of the caller's offices. We basically went to the Labour Party and went to other influential people. And, you know, within a couple of days of us raising it, and it's going to be raised in Parliament, they changed their position. So I think we've got to look at this in the longer term. You know, I'm sure there is going to be some impact on the callers' offices if you automatically redeliver. Whether that works or not, in terms of, you know, that service that they're saying they're offering, we'll have to see. I think the best thing that Royal Mail should be doing, when I drive around and look around, some of these companies have got places on the high street. Now, Royal Mail should be on the high street. We should be doing a deal with the post office, working together, hopefully one day bringing the post office back, and Royal Mail should have a presence on the high street, and where they can, obviously in callers' offices. So it's not something we like, but we'll have to deal with the reality of that over the coming months.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I'd just like to say now, on behalf of the branch, we're 100% behind you, Steve. You know, no one could be more prouder of the Portsmouth MP of the branch. You know, 18 days solid, 100% of people taking industrial action. And Steve, you've been a victim of like many of these like jumped up charges. I mean, I'll give you an example of someone that who works under my region, and he's a political officer. And on a picket line, he was handing out Morning Stars a political sort of newspaper. And on that day, he was so busy handing them out, he just handed to someone that was actually walking in on and crossing the picket line without realising it. And then that person turned it against him and said that he was intimidated about it and giving him Morning Star. So I mean, that's again another jumped up charge, and I just think, you know, I don't know what his situation is yet. I know he's been suspended, but you know, and I said it at the branch meeting when we made the mandate, put your faith in this independent review, because I think it's the best chance that we've got to address, you know, all these jumped up charges. So Steve, if there's anything we can do, you know, don't hesitate. Has anyone else got any questions?
No questions on later starts, later finishes.
Yeah, well, lady over there, what's your name? Sarah.
You used to do like walk tests. Do they still do this? Because the amount of more work they're putting on us and more things we have to do, it does affect obviously the hours we work, and it's not always obtainable with everything else that goes on. Now also like managerial delivery, it's kind of there's more and more put on, but there's no more hours to do anything. I just wonder, do you still do walk tests? Or
I'm going to personally say it now. Look, I remember some of those when you used to do revisions. So when I first did a revision as a rep, many years back, we actually did it with a bit of string and pins on a map. And we literally, and you did a bit of time and motion study where somebody followed you around. And of course, what used to happen was that often the person with the lightest walk in the office, on the day of the test, they would make sure that it stayed as long as they could to keep the lightest walk. And we used to go around, I mean, it was just farcical, really, because we would put a bit of string up and say, well, that looks like a bit, come down that road there, there's one walk. And we would use some of that information. What we're dealing with now is technology. We're dealing with technology that ain't going away. And I would argue strongly that even in this agreement, look at how we've repositioned the issue of technology again. We've got them back to the commitments that they were there before. But here's the problem. With this technology, you know, they can see everything that's going on at every point of the day. And in other companies where this happens, that becomes the stick. And that's what Royal Mail want to use it for. Now, we think the better way forward, there's a section in this agreement that the union have put in there called New Ways of Working. Not them, we put it in there. We want to have a proper look at some new ideas, because we don't believe that the idea that managers, more and more of them, have to watch what our members are doing on a daily basis isn't the right working environment. We've curtailed that under the terms of the deal to some extent, apart from where they believe there's been either an accident, a serious accident, or gross misconduct, potential issues. You're not going to stop them looking at it for that reason. And there obviously has to be stuff that's interactive with customers, where people, as we move forward and there's different products, different services, Royal Mail are operating in the next day parcel delivery thing. We're going to have some of that technology used to improve, as I say, the customer service. But what we want is a proper discussion with it going forward about a different way of working, where over a period of time, we set out some ground rules. Everybody knows what's expected of them. Everybody knows that the idea is to make sure we can deliver what's there. But we actually trust people. And we let them, we'd like to do some pilots on this, where they have their way of working over here. And we create this different way of working, including what our members say about how the office should run. And we test the two over maybe a 6-month period to see if we can ever get to a place where the workforce are trusted and not looked over at every minute. Now, I think the vast majority of our members will respect that. And I think there would be a better work environment. I think you'd get people focused on, let's turn this company around. You'd get people's experience coming in the right way. And you create a whole better job out of doing it. So that's in there in terms of we're going to trial some of those ideas. And let's see where that goes. But no, there isn't the days now where you do the testing of a walk and someone followed you around. I think it's called time and motion studies. It's all based on the technological data that they get, and it's all based on averages of this, that, the other, various speeds of walking and everything. And of course, people ain't average, are they? And this is where Dwayne's point plays in very much. We've got an ageing workforce. We've got to look after those people. We've got to come up with solutions that, create the right environment for everybody.
John Baker?
Yeah, Dave, thanks for the history lesson about pre-World War II revisions. So what about the later start times and later finishes then?
Oh, suck up.
So look, let's have a proper discussion about this and see where you think we are with it and see whether you think we can deal with it. So the first thing to remind ourselves is that what they wanted was up to 3 hours later starts. And their plan for that was about introducing that pretty much now. And their plan for that would have meant the end, in our view, of daily deliveries, the end of the USO completely. And it would have meant them abandoning effectively any operation in the morning time. And people would have been delivering well late into 6, 7 o'clock, whatever. Where we've gotten to is up to an hour. I mean, that's 2/3 better than their proposal. There is a caveat to that if that doesn't work, we've accepted that it might have to go up to 90 minutes. But we're very confident, if you read the agreement, we've got a year to get this right. It doesn't come in now till 2024, around this time next year. And there's going to be a joint working group that's going to involve people at all levels, including local offices, to look at this. It's about reconfiguring the network. And there's a couple of things in this that we can't do anything about. One of them is they want to compete as a low carbon courier. None of the other parcel couriers use flights. Royal Mail uses flights predominantly because it's the only way they can properly connect with the USO and everything. We're doing both, parcels and letters. Some of them go obviously on lorries, but there's still some that go on flights. They're going to serve notice under the green agenda of using flights. We can't stop them doing that. That creates this problem. So how do you configure the network so that you can still deal with the USO commitments and at the same time give customers an opportunity to go online up to about 10, 11 at night and make an order that's going to be delivered the next day? If the company ain't playing in that market, it ain't growing. So it has to be done. What we've done is got it back to something which we think is manageable. Up to an hour on your current times, so that's based on what you're doing at the moment. The guys who are working on that will go through that working group, and we're confident within that we can make that work for our members. On top of that, this 1630 issue that people were saying, we've seen it online where people say, we're all working with 1630. That's not true. That is not the marker for this agreement. That's the last letter. The current last letter is 1530. So it's moved back an hour. Not everybody in the country is working to 1530 at the moment. So the marker here is how you reconfigure the network. And every single office, before the vote goes out, the plan is to give you the initial modelling on both 60 and 90 minutes where you can see what it actually means to you. Now, we think we can do better than that initial modelling through the working group. So we think we can put it back, and we don't think it's going to be as bad as what you're seeing people say. But I mean, people should get that information, and we want them to have that information before the vote goes out, so they can make their own minds up. We get completely that, the later finish is the problem. Later starts, I mean, I would imagine some people quite enjoy having a bit of extra time in the morning, but later finishes is the real problem. And, when it comes to that, we're going to have to work our way through this and make sure that we can deal with it. Deal with it on a Saturday as well. So it's been modelled on the basis of a Wednesday. Traffic on Saturday is significantly less than Wednesday. So you should be able to come up with revisions where you can realign hours of work and come up with attendance patterns that still give you a decent time to finish on a Saturday. And this is the point where, I think we've got to stop thinking that we're victims of some big plan by Royal Mail, and we can't do anything about it. We've got to get back to what we were very good at. I mean, they didn't introduce 5-day working. The union introduced 5-day working. I know areas, you know areas, where people have taken that on to 9-day fortnights, where people take that on to, better than that, 4-day weeks. We've got to get back to figuring out solutions to these problems, not waiting for them to come up with their grand plan. And then you use the IR framework. I've always believed that you're far better looking at something and saying, I'm going to work up something that deals with this for what the company needs, but I'm going to do it in a way that gets our members good attendance patterns and the best possible start-finish times that we can manage. And if we do that, we use the IR framework properly in a constructive way, then we believe that we're going to be able to minimise significantly later finishes. The final point I'll make on it is the issue of family-friendly duties. So there are exception clauses in the deal where Royal Mail have agreed to strive, that's quite a strong word, to accommodate every single person who has caring responsibilities or picking the kids up. Now, we can't guarantee that that means literally that everyone's going to do it. I'll tell you what, if I was in the local office, I'd be looking at that and I'd be making sure that the people who were really in that position, who had to pick their kids up, we'd work out those duties within them. I know offices who, I said it earlier on to one or two of the guys, they've already done it. They've started looking at it, they've got in advance of the agreement where they're starting to plan some of this in a way that when the network change comes in, they've already made certain adjustments, not by management, by negotiation on that. So we'll be coming out with models, with opportunities to look at that, and we've got to have a bit of trust in ourselves here to make sure that we can get a better deal for our members than just simply letting Royal Mail press ahead with their plans as they originally intended to do.
Okay. Anyone else? Chris?
Oh, go on, I'll
Wherever you want.
You've got one of yours, someone to come in, have you? Right, I'll do Chris first and then yourself, Colin.
Yeah, I'll have to speak up because it's a directional mic. Dave, obviously the members meeting here, I think, loads of great questions. The people here are representing the branch and surrounding branches really, really well. Been let you off the hook, have been robust, but have been respectful. Fantastic. From the members here, but online, as in society, we see it with like Brexit, we see it with the pandemic. The online world is a very, very different world. We've got about 11,000 people watching you right now, which is great. They're reaching out. We've got a few hundred who perhaps are not being so courteous, should we say, or friendly. And then there's a few things I thought they, might ask you to get a bit more passionate or pointed with. So we've got people saying that the strikes were pointless, people saying that the union sold them out, people saying that you're sounding like Simon Thompson, people saying that we haven't achieved anything in this dispute. people asking what the plan B is, and perhaps the opportunity for you to give a bit of a G-up final message as well. So there's a community online basically saying like, this ain't good enough and we want it from there.
Well, look, the first thing I'd say is it's not about being passionate, it's about being truthful. And you will get people online. I mean, we all know that goes on in life, and they sort of get quite brave when they're in that position. And maybe they don't turn up at meetings like this. They want to do it online. But that's up to them. We respect everybody's views. But we have to be respectful to each other. People will have a vote. The union is a democratic organisation. Our members will vote. We are going to go out. We're going to engage people. What I said earlier on is the most important thing for our members is that you use your vote and that you do so on the most informed basis possible. And personally, I wouldn't listen too much to some of those people that are saying some of the things that Chris has just read out. I'm not saying that they're not disappointed. That's up to people to have that view. But to suggest that we haven't gained anything from this strike, well, that's just absolute rubbish. Do you really believe that the company was sitting there and wanted the deal, any agreement? You know, I made that clear. That's why we went through 18 strikes, because we were dealing with an employer, the most vicious anti-union that any company has seen in this country since probably the Wapping dispute. And we've come out of it with a union and our reps back in the workplace, and we have shifted them as we've gone through on every single one of their positions. And we're also being honest, saying, what next? What if you vote against it? Well, I've said that. I'm not forcing that on people. You vote how you feel you need to vote. But there ain't no future for Royal Mail without change. And we've always said that every single time I've done an interview, you've heard me say, we ain't facing away from change. It's a shame that it had to come through this type of dispute, but we have ended up with a far, far better position than where we started. So, you know, I mean, that's up to those individuals. What I find when I go around is that the vast majority of people, decent people, are now work it out for themselves, and they'll realise and make up their minds based on, you know, having a good debate with their work colleagues, having a good debate with their union reps, and coming to the decision. We'll respect that decision. One thing I will add, you know, we know that some of these people who are organising that, they ain't got no interest in you and the future of this company. Some of these people are some of the extreme political groups who sometimes look to infiltrate trade unions. That's who they are. And, you know, I mean, whenever I see these people, I tell them, you've never ever been on strike, mate. You don't even know what a strike is like. You've never negotiated an agreement. You're not here to look after people's long-term jobs. You're here to cause whatever you think your political cause is. Now, look, I respect their right to do that. What I don't accept is that they should over-influence our members in this particular dispute. And this, you know, when you're on strike, then people think you're brilliant. When you do a settlement, they think you're a seller. Now, I'm differentiating between, I'm sure there's some of our members online who are genuine members who are saying that as well. So I'm not suggesting that everyone who's online is saying that. But look, it's up to people individually. Have a look at the deal, you'll make your mind up. We think you'll make the right decision.
Okay, Colin?
Oh, I was going to say that. No, just a salient point. Attendance procedure. Am I right thinking under this proposal that when you have a back to work interview that's been modified, the fact that the manager can tell you then that he's not going to issue it?
He can't automatically issue it, but he can tell you that obviously where you are going forward. We would have the right as a union to come in. So you as a rep, Colin, or anybody else as a rep, can still go in and go with our members to those interviews.
Yeah, I know.
You've got the right to challenge that.
Okay, I thought it was the fact that...
What they say is it's automatically triggered, but they'll listen to any mitigating circumstances So technically, it shouldn't be an automatic issue. What it should be is our reps getting in there and having a chance to support our member. If the case is a genuine case, they should listen to that.
And this is a back to work.
Yeah. Yeah, when you are welcome back interview, isn't it? So they call it.
Right, Dave.
Yeah, I've got a question around the quality of service. We know that not just during this dispute, but for the last 2 years and more, Royal Mail have really cared less about the letter post, and they prioritise parcels over the letters, which we know in the long term will be totally detrimental to the delivery of letters going forward. This agreement covers that point, but what checks and measures are going to be put in place to ensure, especially at a local level, Royal Mail are held to account for that? And also what's going to be done with regard to the way they report it, because we know full well that an office will leave an entire round but just take out the letters where they're taking parcels, which is what they're prioritising all the time, and then report it as a part failure, and the entire round has failed other than a few letters.
So I think what's different will be the games up front on quality of service. You know, I know for a fact that the Royal Mail Group Board have said to the company, the operation side of the company, you know, you may have introduced revisions, you may have dealt with some of the financial issues, but at the price of quality of service. And the company can't survive if it can't deliver quality service. It ain't going to grow. So I'm going to keep coming back to this point, Dave. What the check and balance is it's not a sustainable company to continue to fail quality of service at the level they are. It will finish off the company. So they've been tasked to put that right. On top of that, the agreement makes it clear that we're going to work together with them to review and put that right. Now, what needs to come out of that, your point about them not telling the truth about some of the levels of failures, well, that's the first thing that's got to come out of that. And, you know, we've been saying this for some time, that they ain't been telling the truth about how bad it is out there. That game's finishing, because Ofcom are onto them as well. The Select Committee are onto them as well. That's why the words come down there from the top of the business. You've got to sort this out. So I would urge every single person in here to speak to their reps and report these failures. What we'll be looking for is to come up with a joint process of reporting failures so that it's more accurate than what Royal Mail has said. And I think in the end, it will be exposed because they've got to put it right. What's your other point?
About the better way of ensuring that, because when they report failures, part failures, for instance, when they actually leave the entire round there, other than take the letters for where they take parcels, and that is recorded on the system as just a part failure, when we know really it's a complete failure of those round units.
And I think you've made the point strongly, and that's the same thing. When we come out, the first thing we've got to do is have a drains up about what are the level of failures. That will be looked at. I think what some people in the union want to do with the paragraph that talks about the revisions as the immediate first step, we want to go in and have a deep dive into a number of offices jointly where we know exactly, learn the lessons there, and then relay that over the rest of the country.
Okay, Dave and then Jenny.
With the SSP, who's expected to cover the SSP? The company or the government? And what way to pay the SSP here?
So, with the SSP, the way it works, I think, is that the company will have to do that for you. You won't be expected to do anything different. I think the current SSP is about £110 a week. It went up, it was just below that, below £100 a week. I mean, it ain't good, is it? But you won't have to effectively do anything. I think they liaise with the government on that, and they do get some of that back. The important point is what we've got them to agree now, is that if the sick absence costs come down, then we can reverse the SSP. And we're hoping.
Just for the amount of payment, or would that be on the terms of the SIP?
Sorry?
Would it be just on the payment of the SIP or the terms of the SIP? Because obviously there's a cut-off at the moment, isn't there? We're changing the cut-off of the SIP. So if you're off for so long, you take so long to get stated money down, doesn't it? Were you changing that?
Yeah, the triggers are changing as well, aren't they? Is that what you're talking
So
about?
would that reverse back?
Not on the triggers, no, not at this point. No, the triggers have come in now, they're different to where they were before. Going forward, they're going to be 3 absences or 12 days in any rolling 12-month period. The first attendance review, I think, is the same all the way through, 3 absences or 12 days over a 12-month period from when you got the first one, and the consideration of dismissal interview works on the same basis. You know, I mean, it's not as where it was previously, but it's still comparable to other companies, not bad. And look, you know, I think every one of us know there will be 1 or 2 people in there who probably play the system a bit, and you know, obviously they're looking to catch some of them people out. I mean, that happens in every industry. You know it gets said to us many times. I don't want to sound like Simon Thompson though, Chris. Can we just have a quick chat about trust and Simon and the CEO and the management team?
Yeah, could you do?
Yeah. All right. Well, look, I'm now talking to our members who have come online tonight. We're going to be out there. We've got national briefings where we're going to be meeting every single local rep across the UK. We want you to consider this document, the agreement, and we want you to take an informed decision, it's your choice at the end of that. But we really are convinced that if you look at the whole package, consider it as an overall package, you must view it against the circumstances, the unprecedented set of circumstances that we've talked about tonight. And we believe that on that basis, this is a good agreement for now and for the future. And it's a good agreement, as I said earlier on, for anybody who cares about the future of Royal Mail, which I know a lot of our members do. It will mean change, but it means change in a way that we can shape and influence it in the way we always have done. So I hope you support the deal, but it's up to you. You'll be getting your ballot paper and you'll obviously make the decision. But thanks very much for so many of you coming online tonight.